Paul Revere went on his famous ride, warning the people about the approaching threat. I can remember getting awoken by Revere, shouting for everyone to get up as the British were approaching. I was both excited and scared. Were more people going to die at the hands of these cruel leaders? The start of Lexington was the shot heard round the world, and it started the revolution. The British outnumbered our local militia, and many were killed. American blood spilled on American soil. We Americans were furious at the British. At least I was. The British marched onward toward Concord only to be stopped by colonial reinforcement. They were forced to retreat back to Boston. Although this was simply a minor win for the American side, we were all overjoyed. This brings us to the present, the writing and signing of the Declaration of Independence. Important revolutionary leaders like Benjamin Franklin, Mr. Thomas Jefferson, and Mr. Adams met in the city of Philadelphia to discuss this document. Jefferson was to write a founding document. It was a huge step for America, but it was unknown as to how the British would respond. But I didn't care. We were free. We would be free. The Declaration stated the wrongs the British had done, and when the government does not protect the rights of the people have the right to overthrow and replace it. These words influenced the colonies. They influenced me specifically. I was an American. To call myself British was a lie. Taken from libraryofcongress.gov, a private journal kept during a portion of the war. This entry taken from December of 1776. Being on a visit to my friend M.S. at Haddonfield, I was preparing to return to my family when a person from Philadelphia told me the people there were in great commotion, that the English fleet was in the river and hourly expected to sail up to the city, that the inhabitants were removing themselves into the country, and that several persons of considerable repute had been discovered to have formed a design of setting fire to the city, and were summoned before the Congress and strictly enjoined to drop this horrid purpose. When I heard the above report, my heart almost died within me, and I cried, surely the Lord will not punish the innocent with the guilty, and I wished there might be found some interceding Lot and Abraham amongst our people. On my journey home, I was told the inhabitants of our little town, New Jersey and Burlington, were going in haste into the country, and that my nearest neighbors had already removed. When I heard this, I felt quite sick. I was ready to faint. I thought of my Sarah Dillwyn, the beloved companion of my widowed state, her husband at the distance of some 100 miles from her. I thought of my own lonely situation, no husband to cheer with the voice of love, my sinking spirits. My little flock, too, without a father to direct them how to steer. All these things crowded my mind at once, and I felt like one forsaken. A flood of tears came to my relief, and I felt humble confidence that he who had been with me in 6 troubles would not forsake me now. While I cherished this hope, my tranquility was restored, and I felt no sensations but humble acquiescence to divine will, and was favored to find my family in good health on my arrival, and my dear companion not greatly discomposed, for which I desire to be truly thankful. December the 7th. A letter from my next neighbor's husband at the camp warned her to be gone in haste, and many persons coming into town today brought intelligence that the British Army were advancing in our direction. December the 8th. Every day begins and ends with the same accounts, and we hear today that the regulars are at Trenton. Some of our neighbors gone, and others going, makes our little bank, green bank on the river, look lonesome. But our trust in Providence is still firm, and we dare not even talk of removing our family. December the 9th. This evening we were favored with the company of our faithful friend and brother, R.W. Wells. This testimony of his love was truly acceptable to us. December the 11th. After various reports from one hour to another of light horse approaching, The people in town had certain intelligence that a large body of Hessians were come to board in town, and we might expect to see them in a few hours. About 10 o'clock of this day, a party of around 60 men marched down the main street. As they passed along, they told our Dr. Odell and some other persons in town that a large number of Hessians were advancing and would be in town in less than an hour. This party were riflemen, who it seems had crossed the river somewhere in the neighborhood of Bordentown to reconnoiter, and meeting with a superior number of Hessians on the road, were then returning and took Burlington in their way back. From us, they crossed over to Bristol, and by the time they were fairly embarked, the Hessians, to the number, as we heard, 400 or 500, had passed what we would call York Bridge. On the first certainty of their approach, J. Lawrence and 2 or 3 others thought best for the safety of the town to go out and meet the troop. He communicated his intention to one of the gondola captains, who approved of it and desired to be informed of the result. The gentlemen went out, and though the Hessian colonel spoke but little English, they found that upon being thus met in a peaceable manner on behalf of inhabitants, he was ready to promise them safety and security, to exchange any messages that might be proper with the gentlemen of the galleys. In the meantime, he ordered his troops to halt. They remained in their ranks between the bridge and the corner of Main Street, waiting an answer from on board. JL and TH went down to report what had passed, and told Captain Moore that the colonel had orders to quarter his troops in Burlington that night, and that if the inhabitants were quiet and peaceable, and would furnish him with quarters and refreshment, he would pledge his honor that no manner of disorder should happen to disturb or alarm them. Captain Moore replied that in his opinion it would be wrong in such a case to fire on the town, but that he would go down and consult with the Commodore and return an answer as soon as might be. While this answer was waited for, Dr. Odell was told that it would be satisfaction both to the Hessian commandant and to our own people to have a person who could serve as the interpreter between them. Not doubting the foreigner could speak French, the doctor went to him, and he had the satisfaction to find it probable, at least, that he might be of service to the people. The commandant seemed highly pleased to find a person with whom he could converse with case and precision. He desired the doctor to tell the gentlemen of the town to the same purport as above, with this addition, that he expected there would be found no persons in the town in arms, nor any arms, ammunition, or effects belonging to persons that were in arms against the king, concealed by any of the inhabitants, that if any such effects were thus secreted, the house in which they were found, would be given over to pillage, to prevent which it would be necessary to give him a just and fair account of such effects, which account he would forward to the general, and that if we acted openly and in good faith, he repeated assurances upon the honor of a soldier that he would be answerable for every kind of disorder on the part of his troops. They remained in profound silence in their ranks, and the commandant with some of his officers came into town as far as JL's, where they dined, waiting the Commodore's answer. The doctor says that as he thought he observed much of the gentleman in the commandant, and the appearance at least of generosity and humanity, he took an opportunity to inform him that there was an old friend of his who was a colonel, and of some estimation in the Continental Army, that he was at present with General Washington, and that his lady, an amiable woman, had gone into the country with most of her effects, that the doctor was ignorant of the place of her retreat, but that before her departure she had begged him on the footing of former friendship to take into his house, and if he might be permitted, to keep as under his protection some few things which she could not remove, and told the commandant he was ready to give an exact account of such of her effects as he had thus taken charge of, and at the same time confessed that when he took them, it was in the hope of being suffered to preserve them for his friend. The commandant responded without a moment's hesitation, "Sir, you need not be at the trouble of giving any further account of those things you have so candidly mentioned. Be assured that whatever effects you have been entrusted with you in this way, I shall consider as your own, and they will not be touched." From this answer, he was encouraged to hope he might be of still further service to his friends, and in the full persuasion that nothing would occur to disturb the peaceable disposition that was making. But as it happened, the Commodore had received intelligence of a party of Hessians having entered Burlington before Captain Moore got down to him, and had ordered up 4 galleys to fire on the town. Wherever any 2 or 3 persons should be seen together, Captain Moore met and hailed them one after another, but the wind was so high that he was neither heard nor understood. The 4 gondolas came up, and the first of them, appearing before the main street, JLTH and WD went down upon the wharf and waved a hat, the signal agreed on with Captain Moore, for the boat to come ashore and give the Commodore's answer in peace. To the astonishment of these gentlemen, all the answer they received was first a swivel shot. Not believing it possible this could be designedly done, they stood still, and JL again waved his hat and was answered with an 18-pounder. Both of these fires, as the gondola people have since told us, were made with as good as aim as could be taken, as they took it for granted it was at the Hessians that they were firing. However, as it was impossible to conjecture that such conduct could have happened or to suspect such a mistake, it is no wonder the town was exceedingly alarmed. Looking upon it in the light of a cruel as well as unprovoked piece of treachery, upon this news the commandant rose calmly from the table, and his officers went with him out to 8 or 10 men who had come to the doors as a small bodyguard, and turned up to the doctor as he went into the street and said he could easily dispose of these people out of the possibility of danger, but that much mischief might be done to the town, and that he would take a view of the gondolas and see what measures might be necessary on his part, but that he should be sorry to be the occasion of any damage or distress to the inhabitants. He walked down the street and sent different ways 3 sentinels in Indian file together to view and report to him what they saw. These being now and then seen at different times, induced the people on board to believe that the houses were full of Hessians, and a cannonade was continued till almost dark in different directions, sometimes along the street, sometimes across it. Several houses were struck, and a little damaged, but not one living creature, either man or beast, was killed or wounded that day. About dark, the gondolas fell down a little way below the town, and the night passed in quiet. While the tumult was in town, we on our peaceful bank, ignorant of the occasion of the firing, were wondering what it could mean, and unsuspecting of danger, were quietly pursuing our business in the family, when a kind neighbor informed us of the occasion and urged us to go to the cellar as a place of safety. We were prevailed upon him to do so, and we remained there until the firing ceased. Now, Patriots, we have gone through these diary entries so that we can better remind ourselves of the journey that we are all truly on, of the nature of what we're doing here in these United States of America at this day and in this time, right here, right now. Whether it's from President Trump being very active on TruthSocial and now X, whether it is the various National Guard and Air National Guard units that are carrying out missions both at home and abroad, or whether it is the digital army and each of you spreading the narrative, overtaking the mainstream media, disappointing the ability of information control, and more than anything, spreading the truth of the actual narrative, the narrative of truth is what I'm trying to say, to counterpoint the deceit, the lies, the extensive treachery that has occurred within our knowledge base. We are waging the completion of the first American Revolution right here, right now. I don't think anything could be more special and more honorable than that. In keeping with that, if we come over here, we're going to talk a little bit about current military behavior and evidence to show that things are not as they seem and that we are, in fact, taking the fight to the enemy. I know we watch the media prostitutes and the various information arms online, both through X and through other, highly censored social media. And it sometimes becomes difficult to remember that patriots are indeed in control of key areas. and that we are, in fact, winning a much broader, highly irregular, highly unconventional conflict. An email that I received on the 27th of August of this year, just a few days ago, sort of underscores and helps to punctuate this, and I'm going to share some of it with each of you now. The email reads, and it was sent just after midnight. Hello, Laura. With SG's recent audio file 79, he mentioned that the National Guard has been more active recently, both in and around the country. Within the last month and a half, I have witnessed and photographed various military aircraft flying low over my area. The activity is highly unusual. I live in Torrance, California, and I can tell you this is not normal. I was a student pilot until last year when my finances took a turn for not better, so I am very aware of what is flying around in my area. I'm also very concerned that this military activity can go the wrong way. I am sure SG knows the videos of an incident that happened in Minnesota 4 years ago. It is being posted on several Rumble podcasts, and the person here, Anons, has included a YouTube link. The video is of paint canisters that were shot at Minneapolis residents on their porch during the George Floyd protests of 2020. They were shot by law enforcement officers of the Minneapolis police. Also, recently on my Ring notifications, I didn't witness this, but several neighbors noticed a Navy Sea Stallion that landed on one of the local beaches nearby, close on one of the South Bay. This is totally not normal. Below are pictures I have taken of the aircraft I've witnessed. The two Black Hawks flew over today, and that was the second set. I didn't have my camera ready for the first. The orange and black helicopter has been seen over here several times doing what looks like a survey back and forth. Below is a flight path I took of it earlier this year when I had the 4Flight app. It did another survey last month, and my neighbors have also noticed it. I watched someone called Monkeyworks on YouTube, and he is calling these survey flights mapping of the battlefield. I'm not sure about this, but the tail number is N28NA, and it's registered to a LiDAR survey company. You can look on FlightAware for the tail number and see recent flights. According to Monkey, these types of flights are taking place all around the country. I have been concerned for some time that with blatant illegal trafficking of military-aged men in the State of the Union, that these military-aged men could easily blend in with certain elements of our military and during martial law could create great confusion. I understand SG has stated that the National Guard, working in hand with the Marines, can bring order and make arrests of bad elements. I think it may be possible to go the other way if we're not careful. I do not know how you will receive this email. It's basically information only, and I wanted SG to see what I am seeing. Thank you very much, and God bless. In the spirit of all of us seeing what our friend from Torrance, California is seeing, I would like for a moment to pull these images up and share each of them with you today. Over here, we're going to click this, make sure that that's on so it will carry the voice through. Again, these have been submitted from Southern California. This is a V-22 Osprey, Marine Corps quick assault airframe and troop delivery airframe. It was Ospreys that we saw descend Anons on CIA headquarters Langley in 2017. Photo of another military helicopter. A Chinook heavy transport helicopter. So duties and tasks assigned to a bird like this would be personnel movement, equipment movement, extraction or exfil from hot combat zones, rapid deployment, things of that nature. Here's a map of the battlefield mapping that appears to be occurring. These flight paths, very linear in nature. So this is obviously being very, calculated. A video from the 2020, or excuse me, a screenshot from the 2020 video. And then a submission of two additional Marine Corps Osprey birds. Looks like maybe just a couple 100 feet up. All of these reports help us to confirm that the irregular warfare landscape playing out before our very eyes is hardly limited in its dimension. and is really pushing the boundaries of what many of us would conceive of warfare to be like and how warfare can be operated. Additionally, the Marine Corps is conducting urban offensive attack exercises as part of service level training exercise 524 at range 220, which is just up the coast from this area. Published on August the 7th of 24, a Defense Visual Information Distribution blurb. U.S. Marines with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Division provide suppressive fire during urban offensive attack portions of an adversary force exercise. Let me see here. SLTE 524 is purpose-built to train, develop, and validate the infantry battalion as part of a larger Marine Air Ground Task Force operation as a stand-in force across a contested, multi-domain, distributed environment. Multi-domain is the operative word here. We are training the Marines, at least in this particular instance, are being trained and perhaps may even be conducting live operations under the guise of training for urban warfare, specifically urban offensive capture and control style warfare and multi-domain integration. Let me see here. The Marine Corps is also currently active overseas in Australia at the present time. U.S. Marines with Alpha Company, 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marines participate in Rapid Deployment Exercise 24 and Predators Run 24 in Australia. Red X is a 1st Marine Division training exercise with this year's iteration planned in conjunction with Marine Rotational Force Darwin 24.3 to rehearse the ability to rapidly deploy capabilities from Marine Corps Base Pendleton, California to Australia. The 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance Group tested the logistical efficiency and unit readiness required to rapidly deploy a heavy equipment unit within the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Theater by both strategic lift and rail. We come over here, we also have the Marine Corps currently active in Indonesia, which is right next door to Australia. And it's worth remembering, Anons, that Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Guam, the Marshall Islands, the Solomon Islands, these are all areas that need purging and have been subjected, I think, in many regards to various levels of both military and law enforcement operation. It's not been that long ago that we talked a lot about special operators in Indonesia and in, across the Indian Ocean there in Myanmar and Thailand. We've talked about law enforcement activities in conjunction with military activities in all of the theaters I just named. So these are interesting and pertinent publications, especially at this point in time. This publication coming out, another Defense Visual Information Distribution blurb, the 28th of August, 2024 from Surabaya, Indonesia. 1st Battalion, 1st Marines participate in small unit tactics training during Operation Super Garuda Shield. Marine Corps 1st Lieutenant Jeffrey Ladair, Executive Officer of Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division, points out details on a whiteboard during a mission briefing as part of Super Garuda Shield near Surabaya, Indonesia. Super Garuda Shield is an annual exercise that has grown significantly in scope and size since 2009. And 2024 is the 3rd consecutive time this exercise will grow into a combined joint force event focused on commitment to partnership and a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, at the same time, the Marine Corps is conducting these operations both domestically and in the Pacific Theater. And I encourage each of you to go and maybe break down some of the more on-the-ground particulars behind these operations because our time constraints today just simply do not allow it. But while this is happening, on the very same day as the publication that I just read off for each of you, National Guard.mil from the Division of Military and Naval Affairs, New York, published an article titled New York Air Guard Unit Supports Navy SEAL Training Exercise. Now, if you click the link that's on dmna.ny.gov, it actually disappoints and routes to a National Guard.mil web domain that is not working at the moment. It's 404. So I went and looked up the logs on the actual website, dmna.newyorkny.gov. And if we come down here, New York Air Guard Sports SEAL Training Exercise by Alexander Rector, 174th Attack Wing. Taken from Watertown, New York. The New York Air National Guard's 174th Attack Wing hosted over 40 East Coast-based naval special warfare operators and combat support personnel for a joint training exercise. During the 3-week Oxblood East exercise in July, the SEALs focused on honing their joint terminal attack controller skills by conducting fire support and close air support scenarios. The training was conducted at the Adirondack Range at Fort Drum, staffed by 15 airmen from the New York Air National Guard's 174th Attack Wing. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hubbard, commander of Detachment 1, 174th Op Group, 174th Attack Wing, stated, "They like our training and they like our range. We're one of the only ranges on the eastern seaboard that can accept high explosive munitions." Isn't that interesting, Patriots? And we've gotten a lot of good feedback. As the U.S. Navy's premier maritime spec ops force, U.S. Navy SEALs are highly trained in warfighting functions, including coordinating joint fire. To maintain proficiency and deployment readiness, the SEALs must train routinely to enhance and maintain lethality. With participating aircraft sourced from the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps, the exercise was a true joint training event. Due to size and remote location, the Adirondack Range allows for various training scenarios and is used by numerous DoD entities. The range is a gym and enables incredible joint training opportunities for the 174th and our joint service partners, said Colonel John O'Connor, 174th Attack Wing Commander. We were proud to host the Navy SEALs and support this unique training event. More than 135 training sorties were conducted by a range of fixed and rotary wing aircraft, enabling the SEALs to recertify special operations terminal attack controller skills and remain deployment ready. The 174th is one of 5 wings of the New York Air National Guard. The wing operates the MQ-9 Reaper remotely piloted aircraft and is headquartered at Hancock Field Air National Guard Base in Syracuse. Now, I find it endlessly fascinating that these exercises, Anons, occurred in July, and it was just earlier last month, in the month of August, that we saw a number of earthquakes break out within the area of New York, across the state in different arenas. I'm not suggesting outright that those might be connected, but I am saying that we have seen significant, I wouldn't, maybe significant's not the right way to say it, but fascinating time overlap or time conjunctiveness between these training exercises and earthquake events, and not the least of which we saw last fall in Iceland. Additionally, from the New York Division of Military and Naval Affairs, actually this coming from the Air National Guard, New York Air National Guard, I apologize, August 26th of 2024, 64 New York Air National Guardsmen from the 105th Airlift Wing traveled to the Azores, a cluster of Atlantic islands that belong to Portugal, to train with Portuguese counterparts for 2 weeks. The deployment for training from July 28 to August 10 included airmen from the 105th Civil Engineer Squadron and Fire Department. Civil Engineer Squadron, so engineers build things and engineers blow things up. The 105th Force Support Squadron and the 213th Engineering Installation Squadron. Each section participated in hands-on training with each other and Portuguese airmen. In addition to collaboration between the 105th and Portuguese, 2 airmen from the Minnesota National Guard's 133rd Airlift Wing Civil Engineer Squadron helped train newer airmen in this squadron. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Thomas, the Engineer Squadron commander, said civil engineers honed their skills in structure maintenance, base support, and chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense. Now, why would they need to train on those things, Anons, out in the Azore Islands in the Atlantic? I encourage each of you to look up the connections to the Portuguese monarchy, Ferdinand and Isabella, and the Rothschild dynasty, as well as the Spanish monarchy post-year 1500, maybe post-1550, and report back. There's a great deal of information I think that you'll find on that overlap and why we now have New York Air National Guard deployed to that arena of the world, which clearly is not a domestic protection operation for the United States, except under certain circumstances. Now, while all of this is occurring, we have these various operations happening. We also have reports that have come in of National Guard units being moved by railway, specifically large Humvees and armored equipment by rail in the United States of America domestically. We have videos that have surfaced since the Democrat National Convention in August of 2024, just last month, that purport to show significant movement of Army units across at least the state of Illinois, at least the state of Indiana, and at least the state of Ohio. At the same time, just earlier last month, the Navy was forced to sideline 17 critical support ships due to manpower issues that existed in actually fielding those ships. Military Sealift Command, this taken from USNI.org. Military Sealift Command has drafted plans to remove the crews from 17 Navy support ships due to a lack of qualified mariners to operate the vessels. The MSC Force Generation Reset identified 2 Lewis and Clark replenishment ships, 1 fleet oiler, a dozen Spearhead-class expeditionary fast transports, and 2 forward-deployed Navy Expeditionary Sea bases that would enter an extended maintenance period and have their crews retasked to other ships in the fleet. 3 people familiar with the plan told USNI News on Thursday. Based on requirements over these platforms, sidelining these ships could reduce the civilian mariner demand by as many as 700 billets. Military Sealift Command operates a fleet of logistics ships that refuel and resupply the Navy's warships around the world and are crewed by more than 5,000 civilians who are employed by the Navy. Across the Military Sealift Command, there are more than 4,500 billets for mariners on a wide variety of support ships, ranging from resupply to fleet oilers, salvage ships, the Navy's 2 command ships, submarine tenders, and hospital ships. For every billet on an MSC ship, there are about 1.25 mariners to fill the positions, a ratio that 2 former master mariners told USNI News on Thursday was simply unsustainable. If you're required to have 100 people on a vessel, there are only 27 more people on shore at any given time to rotate those crew numbers, said a former mariner. At that ratio, a mariner would be at sea for 4 months, off for a month, and then they would have to return. No one is able to have a healthy work-life balance and be able to get off the ship and get adequate time to go home, then have time with family, take leave, take care of medical requirements, and then return. There is so much training required of every billet to stay proficient with requirements and training and merchant to stay proficient with Navy requirements and training and merchant marine credentialing. That was an odd sentence. That's much more time at sea than commercial mariners. For example, the Marine Engineers Beneficial Association union contracts requires that members work with 2 mariners for every billet, which translates to a paid month off for every other month at sea. Now, I find it absolutely fascinating, Anons, that we're seeing the Navy literally sidelining significant and critical logistics support vessels at the same time that we're seeing the Marine Corps ratcheting up operations in the Indo-Pacific Command. It very much seems like we've got 2 different game boards that are being fielded with that particular attitude. That's a little bit of a supposition on my part, but the math just isn't mathing if we want to utilize the terminology with that. And when we compare that to the activities that are clearly happening here domestically in the United States of America, as well as around the world, specifically pertaining to the National Guard and the Marine Corps, and we look at the deployment and movement of U.S. naval assets now out of the Pacific theater of operations with very limited exception, it looks as though we have 2 militaries at play, a military command that is attempting to carry out the progression forward of worldwide dominance through military force and firepower, and a military command that seems intent on reining in warlords, mercenaries, military commanders for hire, things of that nature, which would cause existential harm not only to the United States, but to the rest of the world. And it's very interesting we talk about existential harm and what's happening with the world, because I think President Trump gave us very clear indications just a couple of days ago about what the next 45 to 60 days really holds for us here in the United States of America. We've talked for a while now that in this period of time, we would see a significant economic event that would come to North American financial markets and Western world financial markets. President Trump has told us several times that he fully intends for some sort of event, an attack of some kind, whether you call it a terrorist attack, whether you call it the activation of sleeper cells, it doesn't really matter. Some sort of domestic, militarized or paramilitarized event to occur here in antagonistic orientation against the United States of America at home. And we've also heard President Trump talk a number of times about the current administration, the Manchurian administration, their fomenting of nuclear war. He's utilized the terminology nuclear several times, again, just in the last 6 to 9 interviews and rallies that have been given by President Trump. So these sorts of narratives and messages are being seeded fairly continuously by the commander-in-chief. And I think we have to acknowledge that if they're being seeded relatively continuously, and if at the same time we have Trump just a few days ago retruthing a number of memes geared towards not only Q, but also public military tribunals, so much that the Associated Press actually latched on to some of those truths, again, from just a few days ago. We have to assume then that the man knows a lot more than he's willing to outright convey, and it's upon us to interpret, I think, in some regards, the deeper message here. If we come over to Donald Trump's TruthSocial to September the 1st of 2024 at 8:18 or 8:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we find a video that was put out by the president, a 2-minute and 14-second video from Gold Star families aimed at Kamala. Throughout the entirety of this video, these families essentially address Kamala as you would expect any family member to address an administration that dishonored the memory of their fallen loved one. And the video is 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. They talk a lot about the failed Afghanistan withdrawal, a lot about the indifference expressed by those out there that just don't seem to care about, America's sons and daughters that are being destroyed in these endless wars. And I found it very interesting that we saw, or excuse me, that this video was 2 minutes and 14 seconds because 2 and then 4 plus 1 is 5. That's your 25 right there, or 25th Amendment. We're going to get into a little bit of a deeper decode on that in a second, but I just found that very fascinating. I also find it interesting that the 214th day of 2024 was Thursday, August 1st of 2024. And if you go and look up Q deltas for August 1st, you find a number of them. I think it's 10 or 11, but one of those deltas is drop 1788 on August the 1st, 2018. So August and then 1 and then 18. So 8118 or 8 and then /18, however you want to, code that. And the drop contains a comment that was made to Q that states, "Someone finally asked about Q." And then Q responds to the comment, "Who is the one person who can answer?" POTUS. Less than 10. Less than 10 or minus 10 or a countdown of 10 of some kind, right? Or beneath 10. These are interpretations that come from that last statement. Again, this delta from August the 1st of 2018. So it would have been a 6-year delta to the 214th day of 2024, which was August the 1st of 2024. But I found it very fascinating because less than 10 or the number 10, maybe 10 days until something, we saw President Trump put out this truth on the 1st of September. So September 1 is 19 in gematria, 9 and then 1. So there's your 19. You also have 10 days until September 11th, which we don't need to get into the significance, behind that, Anons. I think many of you out there are deeply involved in how significant that is. And there is a drop that comes back to September 11th of 2018, drop 2153. And this drop includes an image graphic of Hillary, Barack, Jim Comey, I believe that's Andrew McCabe, and I believe that's Loretta Lynch. And the drop states one sentence, "Coming very soon to a theater near you." On this image graphic, we have 5 sets, of 5 stars. 5 times 5 is 25. President Trump has talked about the 25th Amendment being a problem for Biden as we go through this Manchurian administration process. President Trump has also said that they spied on my campaign. We know it's all going to come back to FISA and Spygate domestically from a law enforcement adjudication sense here in the United States of America. So I find that very, very interesting when we marry that caricature of that potential 25th and the association with 9/11, the 5 sets of 5 stars, the drop coming on September the 11th, which is 10 days from the date of this truth that President Trump put out. September the 11th is also 10 days from the date of this tweet or X post that President Trump's Real Donald Trump profile put out, September the 1st of 2024 at 4:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So there's your 11/11. September the 1st, 9/1 of 2024. And it is simply an image graphic. I'm going to bring this up for each of you here because it's not just simply an image graphic. It is a, I think, very compelling image graphic in the sense of irregular warfare communication being given to us to let us know some things that are coming down the pike and things that I think President Trump is aware have to occur before we can finally reintroduce justice, balance, and true enforcement of the law and the dutiful landscape that Americans wish to see. Well, allow me a moment here. I'm going to share my screen with each of you. So here is the post from the Commander-in-Chief on X, formerly Twitter, September the 1st of 2024, 3:07 according to my device clock because it's stuck on Central Time, but it's 4:07 Eastern. Now, this is a very interesting graphic, is it not? Because we have a red box, we have break glass in case of emergency, cracking of the glass. We've described consciousness warfare as a cracking of the glass of reality, a cracking of the perspective for normies and sleeping patriots out there. And we also have Kamala, of all individuals, holding a large red hammer, but it's not merely a red hammer. If we maximize this, we can see that this is a red gavel-style hammer or a sledge of some kind, a sledgehammer, if we want to call it that, with a gold nugget on the end. Ostensibly, the gold nugget would be utilized to crack the glass here, providing for the emergency situation contained within the red borders, all right, of this glass case, the red sides, the box of this glass case, the kill box, right? The gold nugget cracking the glass of consciousness, activating the emergency conditions of the kill box. That is a powerful, powerful, powerful discussion to be had because it fundamentally is the Commander-in-Chief telling us that events to come, which are geared around gold and also around national emergency and conditions of national emergency. So a financial changeover or a renewing of the financial landscape would certainly qualify, I think, for much of this, Anons. We're having a real-time discussion here, not only from President Trump's TruthSocial profile, but also President Trump's X profile, formerly Twitter, to point us to a couple of different things. One is the very significant likelihood of a 25th Amendment coming in our very near future, potentially in response to a financial crisis or a financial emergency, which then provides the basis for a much larger expanded national emergency condition. Additionally, what I find very interesting is that the book, excuse me, let me back up a little bit. I find it very interesting that we have a red hammer or a red gavel with a gold ingot being symbolized here in this picture and being held by Kamala because of the State Department's actions under the Kamala Biden Manchurian administration over these last 4 years and their significant fomenting of what you could call maybe a Red Dawn Rising style moment, certainly a larger conflict with Russia. Tucker Carlson described not that long ago on one of his broadcasts that we are, in fact, in a hot war with Russia. It's U.S. personnel in many regards. It's U.S. equipment. It certainly is U.S. dollars. It's U.S. armament and munitions, along with some of those contributed by NATO that are allowing the ongoing hostilities to continue happening in the countryside of the Ukraine. And each of us out there knows, if we've been listening to broadcasts like this for a long time, that a great deal of these escalations are occurring to prevent Russia from outing to the world the real depravity, the real truth of what has been undertaken by the NATO West in the countryside of the Ukraine for a very long time. So if you come over here to the treasonous censorship engine called Google and you type in Red Hammer, one of the very first things that comes up is a book titled Red Hammer 1994. Red Hammer 1994 is a fictitious tale of an alternate scenario resulting in a nuclear World War III in the early 1990s. The feared regression to authoritarianism takes place in a post-1991 Russia, whose leader proceeds to launch a nuclear strike on the West. Now, all of us know that it has been the plan of the NATO Western world ever since Uranium One and the Clinton fiasco to set up Russia as the blamant for, or as the scapegoat for, a nuclear third world war. The arrangements that were made through Uranium One, various Canadian mining companies, Kazakhstan reserves, and Russian oligarchs between 2010 and 2015 essentially teed up this very scenario. So if we come over here, I'm going to read a couple of quick synopses of Red Hammer 1994 because I think President Trump is simultaneously telling us through these communications from his TruthSocial and his X profile that a series of cascading events is likely to happen in rapid fashion, perhaps an escalation of war at a worldwide level that results in the turned down financial emergency here in the NATO and North American markets, which itself would result in further emergency measures taking place. We've known for a while that some sort of significant event is going to happen to restrict certain activities within the North American countryside and within the NATO Western world countryside if any sort of military roundup and mass arrest campaign is to be successful. So Red Hammer 1994, as taken from Goodreads, in the fall of 1993, Russia's October Revolution left ultranationalists in charge of a collapsing economy and a desperate people. With a disintegrating infrastructure and wounded pride, the Russian president decides to make a bold move and confront the United States. Red Hammer 1994 is an exciting military thriller about nuclear war. The novel explores professionalism and extreme courage in impossible situations while asking tough questions about how leaders can hope to function amid destruction. Action-packed and thought-provoking, the novel describes the complex nature of nuclear warfare. Expertly crafted, it is for anyone interested in geopolitical issues, and it was inspired by a career spent working on Air Force strategic weapon systems with a nuclear engineering background. Robert Radcliffe, the author, wrote this novel after gaining a deep understanding of nuclear weapons and the composition and capabilities of the United States and Soviet arsenals. With a desire to write a book that explored complexities and issues of nuclear war, Red Hammer 1994 was designed to provide thought-provoking realism while captivating readers. If we come over here to sealionpress.uk.co.uk, Robert Radcliffe's Red Hammer 1994 is an alternate history novel about a Russo-American World War III. Unlike some of the others I've mentioned previously, this features a proper nuclear exchange without really bothering with conventional restraint. While I've said many times that one of the biggest eye-openers for me is that there were very few conventional World War III books at all, there also aren't that many that have the general tone and theme of a Bond-style techno thriller while letting nukes loose but not causing an apocalypse. This book has the strengths and weaknesses of such a thriller. It goes into detail, gives a broad scope and viewpoint about what a nuclear war involves, and gets many of the technical issues right in ways that a lot of popular authors just simply wouldn't. Of course, it also means clunky pacing, characters as cameras, which exist just to show the reader various pieces of equipment, and tons of exposition. As for the plausibility, it's up to you to decide whether a large but not apocalyptically large nuclear exchange is believable, or it is less believable than a World War III staying conventional from start to finish. I could accept that as what Radcliffe wanted to tell, and that's more important than spherical how many B-52s can dance on the head of a pin arguments. There is one set piece that I did find iffy, and that's the impoverished early post-Soviet Russia still being able to deploy a giant force of super Spetsnaz into North America. The ending is very abrupt and disappointing, and not in a it did go apocalyptic way. In many ways, this book is like Mike Lunenwood's Long Reach, another post-1991 techno thriller, which I've reviewed here. It is imperfect, but it's also a work in a very underutilized, hard-to-write niche that does demonstrate genuine talent. Such books are very rare, and even a mixed one is still something to be treasured, especially one that's unambiguous and unashamed to present an alternate history instead of trying to be contemporary. And excerpted from another review going back to 2015. When I first saw this book, I was hoping it would be like one of my favorite books from the 1980s, The Third World War by General Sir John Hackett, published 1979. For the most part, I wasn't disappointed in that respect. I've always been a fan of alternate history and what-if stories. This appeared to fit nicely into that category. Red Hammer is based on the premise of a nuclear war beginning in 1994. A struggling Russia elects an ultra-nationalist president who wishes to return Russia to the forefront of the world stage. He orders his military to plan a first strike nuclear option to cripple the United States. Russia's preparations are largely ignored, except for a couple of government officials who see what is happening and try to raise the alarm. Their warnings are mostly ignored and seen as paranoia or leftover Cold War mentality. As the first missiles are launched, the Russian government is caught off guard and has to scramble to react. An American president who cannot make up his mind and wants to believe it is just a huge misunderstanding causes the plans to save the government to be ineffective. As the war goes on, we follow a bomber crew, a missile submarine crew, and several surviving government officials. I won't list all the players here, as the only disappointing element in the book was the lack of depth in the characters. They were stereotype cutouts without much to make them interesting. The author did do a great job of describing the escalation of missile exchange and a couple detailed descriptions of damage such weapons would cause. Even with cardboard cutouts for characters, it is still an excellent read. The what-if aspect is very interesting and explored in depth. The ending leaves you wondering if the author intended it to be a series or not. I, for one, would love to see what happened next. I would give this book 3 out of 5 stars due to the lack of character development and its somewhat foggy ending. Now, here's where this just continues to get even more and more fascinating, Anon. So we're clearly seeing a reference to the very events that President Trump has been describing would come to this deep state globalist corpocracy that exists in the Western world, and also the events that have been, I think, in many regards, harbingered by a number of different schools of religious and prophetic thought and spiritual significance and acclaim, certainly in the last 1,000 years, but I would submit going back even 2,000 or 3,000 years. So isn't it then just very interesting and sort of some icing on the cake that the Twitter post or X post, which included this red hammer tipped with a gold nugget next to a break glass in case of emergency red box, was put out at 4:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If we remove the 0 because zeros don't mean anything in gematria, it comes to 47, which is President Trump's publicly espoused intention to be the next 47th president here in the United States. And drop 47 from the cue boards taken from November the 2nd of 2017 reads, "You can paint the picture based solely on the questions asked. Be vigilant and expect a major false flag. Does anyone find it to be a coincidence there is always a terrorist attack when bad news breaks for the Dems? What is that called? Military relevant how? Barack could not and would not allow the military to destroy ISIS. Why? How was ISIS formed? When? How has POTUS made such progress in the short time that he's been president? Alice and Wonderland." So Alice in Wonderland for you Anons out there is a clear reference to Hillary Clinton and the bloody wonderland of Saudi Arabia. We know that ISIS is a terrorist group that was created by the Clinton State Department, by the Obama administration, and a number of other factions and cells throughout the Middle East out of the intelligence communities, and was targeted very early on by the Trump administration for complete and total destruction. But fundamentally, ISIS also represents the potential of an Islamic-style terrorist attack here in the United States of America, which is something that is, I think, rooted in a great deal of narrative acceptance and worldview acceptance, even now in our wonderful American population. While I fundamentally disagree on how some of that caricature and architecture has been constructed mentally, I also understand that 5 decades of military-grade psychological warfare to that effect are not easily thrown off, and they are also not easily disappointed. So when President Trump tells us that there's a 100% chance of a terrorist attack here in this nation, and he said that now at least twice, potentially 3 times over these last many months, I find it just absolutely very, very interesting that we're starting to see the tracking of groups like Hezbollah, like Antifa, which never went away, even like ISIS, and certainly some overlap between some of those groups in common form. And we're seeing that tracking and tracing even coming out now into the public domain. True to form, American patriots are not going to be taken by surprise a second time. We saw the events of 2019 and 2020, and I think a great deal of us out there had a difficult time adjusting to those events. Even those of us who saw those events coming with their severity and their ferocity had to backpedal to step back and punt and reevaluate. But taken from a Twitter profile of an individual whose identity I don't want to publicly proclaim at the moment without their permission. This individual identifies themselves on Twitter, X, formerly Twitter, as an investor and a board member, a big data pioneer, a former Intel operative, a CIA NSA contractor, a whistleblower, a philanthropist, excuse me, and looks like a data scientist exchange. The pinned post on the profile states, my partners and I have been lifetime data scientists. We own the digital ID of every mobile device and computer in the United States and have indexed and archived every IP address in the world. Our extensive experience in big and deep data, including geo-tracking and location, makes our dozens of companies the top authority for providing data to corporations, law enforcement, and U.S. agencies like CIA, NSA, DOD, DIA, NGA, NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, FBI, as well as Interpol and foreign intelligence. There are a number of videos documenting ghost buses, as well as a number of nondescript DOJ vans that dropped off ninja-wearing individuals that appear in other videos to have breached the Capitol on January 6th, cutting fencing, removing barricades, opening doors, and other nefarious behaviors. The FBI has all of our information. Shortly after they were alerted, AT&T accidentally corrupted that and only that particular cell phone user's data, referencing a J6 pipe bomber. Now, a post on this profile a little bit further down, that pinned post is from November the 15th of 2023, the anniversary of the Articles of Confederation. Further down on this profile, we have a post that reads, of the 61,000 foreign Antifa devices that arrived in the Chicago area over the past 2 weeks, less than 4,000 have left the United States. The remainder are relocating in large numbers, but divided into small groups of 2 to 20 in Wisconsin, Colorado, New York, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and even California. You, as the reader, need to keep in mind that the average Antifa soldier comes from a white, wealthy, globalist elite family based in Europe, and the top 1% of the 1%ers, most from straight-up globalist families. I wonder if they put anarchist on their tax returns. At the same time, or around the same time that this post was put out on X, we saw images emerge from the Democrat National Convention where individuals at that convention, including former President Clinton and members of the current administration, were photographed in real time with none other than Alex Soros. Now, we know that Antifa is an extension of the Soros monetary machine. We know that Antifa has been sort of the militarized enforcement arm of the administrative capture of the pulpit of district and commonwealth attorney and city attorneys or prosecutors through that same Soros machine, not only over the last 6 to 8 years here in the United States, but going back a number of decades now. So it is not surprising that we should see President Trump talking actively on TruthSocial and on X, letting us know that it is these same cadres of individuals, the same microcosmic globalist deep state infiltration that controls the machinations and the function of the entire Democrat Party. We are going to see these individuals outed through activation of their very assets. You know, one of the things that I think is worth remembering is that these activations have been occurring in slow boil form for a long time. We've been dragging them out of their hidey holes, forcing them out into the light through various directed energy weapons, which were then tracked down and destroyed or neutralized, through various earthquake events, which were then responded to on the ground, resulting in some cases, in at least one case, a significant mass arrest of militarized personnel, foreign militarized personnel in the Turkish countryside. We are forcing them in a slow boil, in a forced attrition kind of way, to come out into the light and to deploy every avenue and aspect that they may have left at their availability and at their disposal. We saw that on July the 13th, for example, 2024 at Butler, Pennsylvania, where President Trump very nearly, came to not completing this particular journey. And it sort of served to highlight to each of us out there the tenuousness and the delicacy by which this operation and many others, occurring concurrently and I believe simultaneously through this process, the delicacy that these are being governed by. And so then we have to ask ourselves, why are we seeing the escalation of events that we are seeing? Is it merely to prevent President Trump from coming back to, the fore? Is it simply to awaken the population? My answer is all of this and more. We have to paint the benefit. Let me rephrase that. We have to allow for the creation of circumstances here domestically in the United States that cause them to lose control of the hot potato. We have to turn up the heat so much that the frog of the American people jumps out of their pot, if we want to call it that. We have to disappoint their aims. We have to create the conditions where an expanded amount of authority and law enforcement, lawful law enforcement, not the corporation and UN NATO law enforcement, but lawful law enforcement can be deployed. And we have to create a situation that paints the globalist entities and institutions as military combatants and enemies of the United States of America and of the peoples and the Constitution for our great republic. Additionally, though, amongst those other things, we also have to prime the landscape for the release of significant suppressed technology and technological capabilities. And we have seen President Trump and Elon and others talking not that long ago about the government waste and the regulatory landscape, the prison, if you will, of the bureaucracy that suppresses technology and disappoints invention and innovation. Like these concepts have now been addressed publicly by President Trump in the last 90 days. They have been brought up publicly by a number of different individuals who have since been offered some sort of contact or proximity to President Trump's transition team and perhaps even a new administration. And so I find it absolutely mind-blowingly pertinent then that when we look at the relationship between Trump and Elon specifically, and the ability of Elon to head up an efficiency commission, which would also allow for the enforcement of the post Chevron doctrine manner of operation, meaning that agencies cannot simply hide things and interpret the law how they wish to, and also the enforcement of and removal of government regulation that is preventing the suppression, preventing the release of suppressed technology. It's just mind-blowing to me that in Butler, Pennsylvania, is not only the location that we saw President Trump's attempted assassination on the 13th of July, but it also plays host to a building to a business called the Tesla MedBed Center. Give me a moment here. I'm going to come over and share this video with each of you because I would like for you to see it.
Butler looks like a hotel. That's because it always has been. Previously, it was a Holiday Inn, then a Days Inn. Now it's called the Tesla Biohealing and MedBed Center. And if you're wondering about the name Tesla, no, this operation is not connected at all with the electric car company owned by Elon Musk.
Now it's been completely renovated.
Their assistant general manager gives us a tour of the rooms, nearly 150 in total. This huge ballroom that has been hosting wedding receptions for decades is still available to rent. But the big reason people come here is in the name, healing. For a few $100s a night, guests can sleep in med bedrooms above Tesla biohealing generators. They're spread all throughout the facility. 23 devices sit in the pool.
They energize the water. You can walk down, sit right on the generators.
Life force energy is the body's ability of innate intelligence to make changes or repair itself.
James Millen, who is a doctor of chiropractic, is the Butler facility's clinical study team leader. He says the company's canisters use Tesla Biohealing's proprietary technology. To buy their products can range in cost from several hundred up to tens of thousands of dollars.
These are 2 for $20,000, but they're also 100 times stronger than what these are. Right. And that's why they have a larger range.
Tesla's website talks up biophoton or life force energy. One example reads it benefits people debilitated by everything from dementia to stroke paralysis, even terminal cancers. Loads of written online customer testimonials echo that. So did 2 clients we spoke with in Butler.
I mean, this does help. No matter what's wrong with you, hey, I'll try anything, if it's going to help me.
I don't have the pain. I'm breathing better. I sleep better.
But also on the website, there's this disclaimer. Quote, Tesla Biohealing does not provide any medical advice. Our products, FDA-registered Tesla Biohealing OTC medical devices and services are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or medical condition. Please consult your own healthcare provider if you have any medical issues. So how do they balance?
Fundamentally, it's not my wish to waste all of your time out there by allowing the remaining 2 minutes in the video to simply discourage us from what we know to be the actual truth here as they attempt on mainstream media to shill for the pharmaceutical giants. And they bring in a doctor later in this video. Each of you out there are more than welcome to go and look it up for yourself, but they bring in a doctor towards the last half, which essentially is a counterpoint and an individual who seeks to, undermine and invalidate the information being presented. But fundamentally, this particular overlapping, I don't think can be symbolically or even statistically ignored. The fact that we have a center operating Tesla biohealing generators, self-described biohealing generators, no doubt producing very significant improvements in bodily and physiological health conditions, perhaps even mental health conditions for those that are able to utilize the technology. And this is the same town that we saw President Trump nearly removed from this race, I believe, at the overall behest of attempting to prevent the release of certain types of technology. Remember, it was President Trump, outbound from his first administration, who declassified a significant amount of suppressed technology patents, which made their way out into the public domain. And President Trump has talked essentially zero or extremely, very, very little, extremely little about any of those patents or technologies or the abilities, scientific abilities that have been, hidden out there over time here in the United States. Sorry, I'm a little bit tied up on my words here. But one of the things that is very interesting to me is if we come over, or an additional thing that's interesting, I should say, regarding this overlap, is if we come over to TeslaBiohealing.com, their website, and we look at the website itself, the website states, at Tesla Biohealing, alongside dedicated employees and partners, we are on a mission to support individuals with untreatable or rare diseases. We understand the heartbreak of being told there is no hope. Over the past 4 years, we have served over 40,000 users facing various health challenges, and we take pride in significantly improving their daily quality of life. At Tesla Biohealing, we believe in the transformative power of biophotons and the potential of natural healing. Our daily mission is to bring light-based healing to those who need it most. This is deeply personal for us, and we are dedicated to making a meaningful difference. We are not just developing treatments. We are bringing hope and a living light to families who have been in the dark for too long. Our commitment is to illuminate the path to better health and brighter futures. Symbolism is certainly their downfall. When we come over to domain registration lookups on ICANN, ICANN, domain information from TeslaBiohealing.com is recorded as registered on 11/15/2019, the anniversary of the Articles of Confederation, the same day which President Trump announced his candidacy for president of the United States for America. You know, Anons, as we go through and we look at the overall landscape, it becomes very clear that we have a great deal to be very hopeful and encouraged about. And yet at the same time, we are also playing, if we will, the most dangerous game for all of human history, and that is the reclamation of the true areas of power and control in our society. Each of us know that there are clearance programs and access programs that exist above the clearance of the presidency of the United States for the United States of America, despite the president having sole and, as far as we're aware, the only identified declassification authority and power in these United States. We have technology, equipment, understandings, knowledge, history, etc., that has been hidden from us, from we the people, for a very long time. We need look no further than newspaper clippings from more than 100 years ago, going back into the late 19th century, where you can see clearly that there are no power poles and power lines lining city streets, and yet individuals in those communities, townships, and small cities were utilizing the power of flowing current just in the day and time, just in the way, I think, in many regards, that we utilize that power today. We are in for the most exciting, tumultuous, turbulent, exhilarating, and thrilling ride between now and the 5th of November, 2024. As I sit back and appreciate where we're at, I'm reminded of those revolutionary diaries that we began our file with today. Their stoicness, their steadfastness, their willingness to go to extreme lengths to find true liberty, true self-determination, and what they believed to be fairness in this great republic of these United States. Colonists who identified themselves at one point as British became Americans in identity more than anything else by the end of the Revolutionary period. By the early 19th century, we had a cultural ethos that had been carved out, the bastion of liberty and the beacon of freedom and hope in the world, protected by the ruggedness of American individualism. We are headed back to that time. It is scary, but it is also hopeful. It is tenuous, but it is also elational. To me, it's peacefulness that surpasses all understanding. We are moving towards a cascade of events here in the United States and in the Western world, which will reverberate planet-wide and will define our civilization and our behavior and relationships with one another for centuries to come. You could not have picked a better time to be alive and well as we literally write the history in front of us. Take it easy today. Enjoy a cold glass of refreshing water or a wonderful hot drink. Feel the skin around your body, the air upon your face, the air within your lungs, the smells, the sights. Appreciate the fact that you are alive now, not 20 years ago, not 40 years ago, and not 50 years into the future, but you are here to witness and take account of these events as they unfold here and now. Together, we write the diary of the future. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I'll be back with each of you again soon. Stay safe, everyone. This is SG Anon. Thanks. Bye-bye.